Hey listener, Jasmin here. This is the last episode of our pilot season of Little Devils. And I know, you and me both are strapped in and not ready to get off this ride yet. I, for one, I'm so curious to meet more little devils. Maybe from Mexico or from Nigeria. How about Syria or Japan? Wouldn't that be cool? But the only way to keep this indie show, this experiment of sorts, going is through community and through ads. And you can help with both of these things. The more you recommend, review, and interact with this show, the more people will find it and listen to it. And the other thing that you can do is even more fun because you'd be part of a community. You can join Little Devils on Patreon and check out if you can support us there. If you believe that this podcast deserves to exist in the world and you want to be surrounded by people who believe the exact same thing. So find us on patreon.com/littledevils. Okay, let's get this episode started. It was 2006, and I was a student living in Cairo. And I was sitting in the International Student Coordinator's office with the advisor, and both of us were staring at the phone on the desk. We were listening to a woman on speakerphone who I used to share a flat with. But then one day, she decided to move out while I was out of the house, which came as a surprise. And then the next surprise was when I discovered that she had taken one of the beds in the apartment with her. I mean, who does that? She was an exchange student, which is why I got the university involved. So the advisor asks her over the phone, "Why do you take the bed?" And the woman goes, "Jasmin is the devil. I cannot live with her anymore." And no, she wasn't going to return the bed. After we hang up the phone with her, the advisor turns to me and she asks, "What did you do?" And I was like, it must have been that time that I invited her to a concert. She'd said that it didn't go with her Christian values or whatever. But I knew right away that that probably wasn't it. I knew the real reason. She'd seen through my cheerful facade and had caught a glimpse of my anger, my rage. That feeling that rushes into the pit of my stomach whenever I feel powerless. Maybe she'd seen that in me. This is Little Devils, and I'm Jasmin Bayomi. I'm curious about the things that we're so quick to judge others and ourselves about, or as I like to call them, our personalized little devils. As I've been working on this podcast, talking to people about the things that haunt them, things that they might want to fix about themselves, I also thought a lot about, what is my thing? What's a thing about me that I wish I could change? And again, I come back to that feeling of rage. Because when I look back on my life and I think about the moments that I most wish that I could take back, it's usually the moments where I got overwhelmed with a situation and lost it. When I got so angry where my words became like daggers, hurtful and unkind. And the person who'd seen the worst of it is my sister, Sarah. This is one moment that I'll never forget. We were still kids, and I was around 14, which makes her 5. It was again one of those times that she'd managed to push all of my buttons, and she was feisty, and in my rage, I clenched my hand in a fist. The punch landed in the wall next to her head. It scared her so much that she peed her pants, and it scared me so much that I still feel so deeply ashamed of it decades later. I decided, okay, maybe the time had come to talk to her about it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, my sister.
You're welcome.
It's so weird.
That's really weird, yeah.
I told her the story. And then, strangely, Sarah said,
I don't have an active memory of that situation, so it's weird. It's really weird that affected you so much, and I don't really have a memory.
And what's even stranger to me is that she didn't think my anger was a problem at all. Instead, she said there was something else that had always bothered her, something totally different.
It's not something that you do, it's more something that you don't do. So you disappear. You just disappear. Since I was a little kid, I think it's maybe like big part of it is because of our age difference. So yeah, like you moved out when you were 18, so I was just 8. So, I had like a couple of years of consciousness, like, where I was like actively seeking time with you and wanted to spend time with you and stuff. So in my mind, you're just not there. You travel, you move to other countries, and then often you're just not reachable for me. So that's just, that's the thing that affected me the most with you, I think.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's life.
The thing is, what she was saying made total sense to me. Growing up, our family life was complicated. We moved around a lot. Egypt, Germany, Egypt, Germany, Egypt. You get the gist. That's because our dad is Egyptian and our mom German. And each of their worlds had rules, and we lived by all of them. With our dad, it was all about respect. Good grades, a sign of respect. Being home by 8 p.m., a sign of respect. Not saying no to him in front of others, a sign of respect. The moment that we'd show emotions, anger or sadness, too much excitement, he'd throw his head back with a stern look and, like an unspoken threat, he'd just go, "Huh." And that was our cue to end whatever it was that we were feeling. And my mom's rules weren't as clear. She loved a tidy home and order. Everything had its place. Sweaters, spoons, emotions. The latter wasn't something that we talked about a lot. Processing emotions didn't appear helpful to her. "Why are you always bringing up these old stories?" she'd say. "How's that going to help the situation? It's just exhausting." She avoided every emotional confrontation. In fact, our parents never fought. Not once in the 20 years of marriage before they separated. The love that we as children received was tied to our ability to abide by all of their rules, an almost impossible task. And when I felt lonely, Sarah was too young to talk to. And when she felt lonely, I'd already moved out and left all things family behind.
I remember before getting my own phone, I tried calling you, and it was very expensive because it was from landline to mobile phone. And like I didn't want to get into trouble for calling you, but like you wouldn't pick up anyway, so it wouldn't cost anything. So yeah, and I remember crying so much just because I had the feeling that you just forgotten about me. And yeah.
Shit. As Sarah talked about those moments in our video call, I could suddenly recognize the teenager that I'd left behind in a different city, and then later in a different country. I imagine a split screen of those moments that she tried to call me. while she sat in our family home, probably still in her school uniform or her pajamas before hopping into bed, with a bulky landline phone in her hand, typing in my phone number, which she knew by heart. And on the other side of the split screen, there's me, cuddling with my first big love, ignoring the buzzing phone. And I remember being out or watching TV or in the middle of studying, and I'd look who's calling, and I'd think, oh, it's just Sarah. I'll call her back when time's good. Because I imagined the other side of the split screen to be filled with drama, with tears and with yelling, and so I ignored it as best as I could. I didn't think about the teenager who just wanted a moment to talk to her big sister and vent about the parents.
Back then I was a kid, so I didn't understand, like, what did I do wrong? I just thought that you were mad at me somehow. Like I did anything wrong, or did I just,
Oh man.
what did I do? Like, am I this annoying that she doesn't even want to pick up the phone? And yeah, so that is like the thing that affects me very, very much. That for me was the worst thing that you did or didn't do. But yeah. I just got used to you being not there, not available, disappearing.
Which is why at this point, Sarah just sees our relationship differently than me. Differently than all the ways I'd always thought of the word sister.
Yeah, in terms of relationship, I don't know, it's like a distant friendship. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, distant friendship with a huge, intense backstory. I don't know, how do you feel about that?
I'm not gonna lie, it kind of hurts me to hear it. Distant friendship. I don't feel that way about you. For me, you're my sister, and it's every time we talk, it is like you're nothing like a friend. Like you're my sister. Like we're the same. Like you are part of me. You know, like it's interesting because for me, this type of relationship where I have this like just deep love for you, whatever happens, you know. But I don't have to be in touch all the time. Like for me, that feels good and that feels like it's enough, but like it feels like it's not enough.
Maybe because, well, I have this safety mechanism, maybe. So, like, I feel our relationship, friendship, sisterhood was one-sided for very, very long. And all that crying I did because, oh my God, that sounds so mean, but all that crying that I did, like, because you wouldn't pick up the phone or, yeah, you weren't even asking about me, you know? So it's just like I lost you, you know?
I do disappear. I'll ghost friends for months, years sometimes, and then I'd pop back up to reconnect and say, wow, it feels like no time has passed. I love it when that happens. And I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Except clearly, I haven't perfected the art of disappearing if I'm hurting people I love while doing it.
Do you think that's something I should change?
You disappearing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. But how? How do I unlearn this? How do I undisappear? I thought about my mom, because as bad as I am with my sister, I'm worse with my mom. Here's the dilemma of our relationship. My mom and I are complete opposites. I love to talk about feelings, and my mom avoids talking about feelings at all costs, even if in our case, the cost is not knowing me. I don't know when exactly she stopped asking me how I was feeling about something. Other than a casual, "Hey, how are you?" at the beginning of a call, I'm having a hard time remembering a single time she did. So, what was there to talk about? Disappearing on her came easy to me. And then, September last year, my mom had a heart attack. Sarah was with her at the time. Both live in the same city, a few hours away from me, and I live in Berlin. Sarah called me the day after it happened. And after my first shock and worry, I felt relieved. Relieved that she didn't immediately call me to help. Because how could I have help from this far away anyway? Wasn't my calendar full of important stuff? It would have been awful to cancel things. And I know how this sounds. It's not great. A week later, I went to see my mom. And I was feeling inconvenienced. It just didn't fit into my life at the moment. I hadn't been in her home in years. When I stepped in, I felt uncomfortable. This wasn't my home. I'd never lived there. The unfamiliarity of the place was weirdly enraging. And so I suggested we go for a walk. But moving at the pace of a recovering heart attack patient, I got frustrated. For the whole visit, I was impatient and judgy and a wise ass. I was kind of an asshole. After the visit, I came back to Berlin and I was full of regret. Regret about the way I treated her, about my impatience, my lack of empathy, and that gnawing feeling of duty. Why couldn't I just be kind? I asked some friends how they would have handled this. Every coffee date, every walk, every dinner I had with friends, I asked if they too had trouble with that feeling of duty. And I was so relieved when my friend Natalina told me, "I totally understand how you're feeling."
I don't think we owe our parents anything. I would love to be in a situation where I feel like I want to do things for them, not because I owe them something, but because I genuinely, from the heart, want to spend time with my mom. I want to be there. I want to have that relationship with her and not feel like I'm not being a good daughter because she has certain expectations of me. That I think is, yeah, that's the ideal state I would want to be in.
Me too. That's exactly it. I'd love to be in a state where I'd want to be there for my mom. How can I stop feeling so annoyed like it's my job to be her daughter? And how do I get her to, God forbid, tell me how she feels? I came up with a plan. Once a month, we'd set up a call and I'd interview her about her life. And I could just listen and be curious about the person sitting in front of me. I could kind of pretend that I was interviewing somebody for a podcast and put aside the fact that that somebody happens to be my mom. And to my surprise, she agreed.
Siehst du? Ganz einfach.
Also Oma schafft das doch noch.
And in that first call, I told her, I'd love to dive into your early childhood.
Wo bist du geboren? Und vielleicht so die ersten paar Jahre, da kann sich wahrscheinlich nicht dran erinnern, aber von Erzählungen und so weiter.
Ja, aber ich habe immerhin noch eine ganz gute Erinnerung. Also am 18. März 1950.
Her memory was remarkable. The amount of detail would make you think that she was walking around with a notebook as a toddler. Like, for example, when she was around 3, she'd ride around on the motorbike with her granddad. And I could only imagine how that scene must have stirred up emotions of
Wie
joy.
war das denn so als kleines
So I
Kind, wenn
asked
sie
if
nicht
these were
noch
some
mit
moments
ihrer
of joy
Freundin
for her,
Traute mit
just
dabei
hoping
sind?
to hear about how she
So
felt.
kleine Glücksmomente zu der Zeit
Ja,
gewesen?
auf jeden Fall. War alles interessant.
Yeah, definitely, she says. All of that was interesting. That's it. Interesting. I waited for her to maybe say more about how she felt, but she dove right back into more details which had nothing to do with feelings. Great.
Und da war ohne Knieschutz, ohne
20 minutes into our first call, and I already felt like a prosecutor interviewing a stubborn witness. And there were more of these moments of me trying to just get a glimpse into that vault that she kept her emotions in. If only she opened the door a little bit. In our next call, I asked her,
Gab es noch schöne Momente?
were there other good moments that she could think of?
Nö.
Nah, no other good moments.
War Einsamkeit da? Weißt du das?
Well, did you feel lonely as a kid? And my mom said,
Nee, eigentlich überhaupt nicht.
not at all. I could feel my impatience rise up. And this might sound silly because here was a woman just trying her best to please me, but I felt angry somehow. I wasn't sure if this was working. So at one point, I decided I'm going to try to force it out of her. I'm going to do a call where I would ask her about one of the only moments that I can remember where she truly confronted me. And I'm going to do it in English. Maybe that would make a difference. That moment was around the time that I was graduating from high school, and she asked me to move out as soon as I graduate. During that time, my parents had just separated, and I helped my mom get settled in a new place. And then I disappeared. Well, sort of. I was a self-involved teenager. For the first time, I was free of my dad's world of rules. For the first time, I was actually free. And so I did what teenagers do. I was out a lot until late. I left my room in a mess, dirty piles of clothes. I didn't help with household chores, didn't check in with my mom, who suddenly found herself alone, unsupported.
You know, I had this full-time job then. I had Sarah, and you were just living your own life, completely your own life. You gave a damn about me, but whether I lived or died or whatsoever, it's nothing. You didn't care.
More than 20 years later, my disappearance still seems to hurt her. At least that's what her face and her tone were telling me. Considering she's not one to rehash old stories, this one hit me especially hard. That call was brutal. Like, really brutal. She got angry, and I just felt entirely misunderstood. This woman, my mom, just can't seem to see me for me. Like, why? Not even now was she asking why I might have acted that way back then. That next month, I canceled our call. I just didn't know what else to try. I found myself wondering who else I could ask for advice. Who has a good relationship with their parents? And the only person I could think of was my neighbor, Peter. He's around my age, and we both share a balcony. His parents come from Canada to visit him quite regularly, and when they do, they ask if they can access Peter's apartment by walking across my balcony. And I'd see them together, the three of them, and I'd think, how on earth are they enjoying each other's company this much? And Peter said something that really surprised me. It was actually something that his dad had told him the other day, and his dad said,
there's doing something out of duty, and there's doing something out of love. And he's like, I really don't want people to do things out of duty. He's like, there's a very different energy when you feel like you have to do something, and the way that you would interact with me is this like feeling of resentment of having to do this and sacrificing and not actually wanting to do it. And that's not a good thing, and I don't want that. And he's like, I sometimes worry that like people may be doing that for us, like that they feel duty to do this.
How did that make you feel when he said that?
I mean, I totally understand what he's saying, and I think the point he was trying to make was that, like, you know, do it from love, and if you don't feel compelled to do it, then like I don't want you to like force yourself. And so I guess part of it felt like, you know, there's this understanding of it kind of relieves some of the pressure, but I do want to like deepen the love I have for my parents so that it gets to a point where it doesn't feel like a responsibility.
Peter realized that whenever he would call his parents, his dad tended to be the one who talked a lot.
And so my mom ends up being quite quiet. And there's these moments when like they kind of bicker at each other, and she's like, David, you don't let me talk. Or sometimes I start talking and you cut me off. And so I kind of observed that it would be nice to just have one-on-one time with each of them. And so what I decided was like I would set up an hour with my dad once a week and my mom once a week. And so we had these calendar invites during that time where we would just talk about anything. And we got to like some really funny places, like we talked about their sex life. And so like it was just really interesting to get to know them as like people versus like they're my parents.
Peter told me it was that simple. A small tweak to the routine of the phone calls, and then, over a bit of time,
they're like friends. It's like they've transitioned to becoming friends versus parents.
The way I understand it, Peter was saying that by treating love as a project of sorts, something that he could work on with his parents, he actually managed to transform that feeling of duty into love. I felt like he just showed me the door to a whole new level. Because that means for me, if I just stick to it and I continue the interviews, yes, I might get over being so annoyed by my mom all the time, but the actual reward, in a way, could be that I could stop wanting to change her so much. If I really stick to this, I could be at peace with who she is and love her for it. Or maybe even in spite of it. Honestly, I always thought that isn't something that could happen with my mom. I thought love for the parents or the children, it's either going to be there or it isn't. Like, it's innate. But what if that's not true? Two months after that very rough interview, I called my mom again. I made a resolution. I told myself I wouldn't judge her. And so, I didn't judge her.
Ja, das waren solche Leute, die da vor dem Krieg rechtzeitig nach Südamerika sind.
It was hard. I stayed away from emotions, mostly anyway. My mom's life hadn't been easy,
Ich wusste ja immer schon, dass irgendwie keiner für mich da ist.
especially not in the early years.
Stellst du dich da drauf ein?
Growing up in post-war Germany in the 50s and 60s, she had to learn early on that dwelling on emotions wasn't going to help her
Versuchen,
much.
selber zu helfen.
Schon sehr früh dann so.
Ja, das war sehr früh, ja, genau.
I stuck to the facts, the plot points, the details. And then, at one point, in our February interview, something surprising happened.
Das war während der großen Ferien und da hatte sie einen Einsatz. Es war ja technische
My mom was
Assistentin.
telling me this story from when she was around 12 or 13 in West Germany.
Und dann sollte ich da in dem Gasthaus bleiben, auf dem Zimmer, bis sie abends wiederkommt.
Her dad was traveling, and it was the summer holidays. And her mom, my grandma, took her along on a work trip. They stayed in a small B&B, and in the morning, My grandma left the room, locked the door, and went to work in a neighboring village. And my mom was left behind in the room, locked in. I mean, who knows what went through my grandma's head? Maybe she thought it would be safer.
Die Absicht meiner Mutter war, sie geht morgens da zur Arbeit in dem Nachbarort, in dieses Baubüro. Und ich bin den ganzen Tag in der Pension. Und abends ist sie wieder da.
My mom was used to being alone, entertaining herself, mostly keeping busy with embroidery. But two boys her age, the sons of the pension owners, had somehow climbed onto the roof and started knocking on my mom's window from the outside, laughing at her, terrorizing her. And they wouldn't stop knocking.
Ich habe mich nicht getraut, aufs Klo zu gehen, weil ich empfand das als bedrohlich.
Again, I imagine a split screen. On the one side, my grandma at work, maybe typing a document on a typewriter or something. While on the other side of the screen, there's my mom, a little girl sitting on her bed, embroidering all day long,
Und habe die ignoriert, den ganzen Terror.
trying to ignore the terrorizing knocks and laughs. The girl was so worried that the boys would break in through the window, so scared, too scared to even go to the bathroom.
Und bin auch nicht aufs Klo gegangen und habe den ganzen Tag es angehalten. Ich fand das auch ziemlich schlimm.
I could feel a lump in my throat. My heart broke for that little girl, for my mom. She had nowhere to turn. The door was
Ich bin da
locked.
eingesperrt, wie so ein Tier einsperrst, ein Hund oder eine Katze oder ein Vogel.
She had no chance to reach her mom by phone.
Und ich hatte im Notfall hatte ich keine Möglichkeit, sie zu erreichen.
She was caged,
Wie ein Tier eingesperrt.
like an animal. When my grandma came back from work, my mom told her about what had happened. And the next day, reluctantly, my grandma took my mom to work with her. But that fear never left her. My mom's life has a lot of these landmark memories of feeling like she was losing her freedom. There's another moment that came to her, one of her earliest memories.
Oder obwohl mich meine Oma mal an den Tisch festgebunden hat, weil ich mein Essen nicht zu Ende gegessen habe.
Her own grandma, who helped raise her, had tied her little leg to a table when my mom refused to finish her food. I asked how all of these situations made her feel.
Hilflosigkeit,
Helplessness, she said.
dass man sagt, das passiert mir nicht nochmal, das werde ich in Zukunft vermeiden.
I'll never let this happen to me again.
Und daher rührt dann auch wohl der große Hang zur Unabhängigkeit.
It might also explain why she's so keen to be independent, she said.
Kein Wut, kein Trauer, aber nur das nächste Mal muss man wachsam sein.
Not anger, not sadness. Just an awareness to be more vigilant next time. And then she says,
Und sobald mich einer greifen will, bin ich weg. So, das ist die Reaktion.
that's why when somebody tries to grab me, I'm gone.
Wenn du sagst, du bist weg, dann bist du auch weg, also nicht nur physisch weg.
What do you mean gone? Like, gone from their
Raus
lives?
aus deren Leben, ne?
Ungefähr, ja.
Something like that, she says. She doesn't say the word disappear, but in my head, that's how I'm making sense of it. If people get too close and they start using her in a way, or they start limiting her independence, she too disappears in her very own way. This was nuts. This was such a new thought to me. I thought we couldn't be more different, and then here she comes and she tells me the story, and turns out we're way more similar than I thought. I tell her how I feel, that sometimes I think we're so similar and then often not at all.
Manchmal denke ich, wir sind uns total ähnlich und manchmal denke ich, wir sind so weit voneinander entfernt. Und ich
Wir sind
glaube,
uns bestimmt ähnlich.
And to my surprise, and you could almost miss it because I'm just nervously rambling, but she says, "Yep, we're very similar." I felt like I'd just caught a fish, but I couldn't cheer yet. I needed to slowly bring it in. This was my chance to revisit that time that I had disappeared on her and she kicked me out of the house. That moment that broke us apart, that we never recovered from. It was a moment that made us the same. And this was my chance to hear her say, "Oh, now I get why you did that." And so I brought it back up.
Hatte ich dich ja gefragt und dann hattest du gesagt, warum du mich damals aus der Wohnung geworfen hast. Und das war ja,
And I wanted to say, see, that was also me disappearing to save my freedom and independence. But I didn't even get to that point.
Hattest du Chaos gelassen, hast auch nichts dazu beigetragen, mal das ein bisschen aufzuräumen oder so.
Before I could even draw the parallels between us, she said, "You know, you could have at least cleaned up after yourself back then." I wonder if she'll ever be able to see past that. If she'll ever be able to fully see me. Or whether this will forever be the worst thing I did to her. And even though that one moment is something that we might not ever find peace with, I do feel that there's a new thread of connection between us. The interviews are working. At least for me. And I want nothing more than to hear it from her too, that she feels more connected to me now. But I don't ask her. Because if I'm honest, I'm afraid of the answer. I'm worried that she's gonna say, "I feel just the same as I always did." And I don't want to hear that. So I don't ask. I feel more connected to her. And maybe that's enough. Thank you for listening. I wonder, do you feel like your family members see you? We've got a little poll going if you're listening on Spotify, and I'd be curious to see how common or uncommon my issues are. All right, you just listened to the last episode of this pilot season of Little Devils. But don't worry, there's more happening on this feed next year. For one, we're going to work on more episodes. And that would be much easier if you join our Patreon community on patreon.com/littledevils. We'd love to be able to hire a proper team in the future and spread our stories far and wide and hear from across the globe. Wouldn't that be cool? Also, if you think you're going to miss these stories and the people in them, then you should definitely join us on Patreon, because I'll be posting some exclusive episodes over there and you'll be up to date about our progress and really brought on board. Actually, I'm pretty excited to keep in touch with all of you there. And of course, there's a bunch of very, very cool perks. If you can't support with money, then now is the best time to rate this podcast and leave a comment maybe. Definitely send it to a friend or your family members. Don't tell me your holiday season was all rainbows and roses. I wouldn't believe it. And also, just a little tip, I recommend sticking around till after the credits for this episode. You'll see why. Little Devils is a TRZ Media original. We're here. Well, I am anyway. And you can email me and the team at TRZ at littledevils@trz-media.de. And you can also find us on Instagram. That's at Little Devils Show. And of course, you can find me on Instagram. That's at Jasmin Bayoumi. That's JasminBaoumy. No Z's, no E's. Little Devils is hosted, reported, and co-created by me, Jasmin Bayoumi, and a small but mighty team of people. This episode was co-created and co-produced by Marta Medveshek and edited by Tim Howard. Marta is so talented that she also mixed and sound designed this episode. Robin Drömer is our executive producer. Our beautiful theme music is by Phoebe McIndoe. Mastering by Joscha Grunewald. Fanny Grabolle illustrated our beautiful cover art. And thank you to everyone who supported, listened, and spent time giving feedback for the episodes. We couldn't have made this without you. Many thanks to Dennis Funk, Graylin Bashir, Hannah Herbst, and Jan Böhmermann. When my mom and I wrapped up our last call, I started talking about my dating failures. The lack of good men, the usual stuff.
Men who feel like they're boys, men who are self-conscious about their age, men trying to catfish women, men with alcohol, men with their tongues out, men flexing their biceps, men in ethically non-monogamous men who just want sex, men with men who don't make demands, men who post faces of their children, men with bad teeth.
Tatsächlich? Das siehst du da alles?
Men, seriously, bad teeth. Men who say they love spending time in Thailand. Men who smoke cigars. Men who only post pics taken from below their chin so that they're literally always looking down on you. Ist wirklich so.
And I remembered this joke that I sent her recently. Because actually, that's a new thing. My mom and I have started to send each other small, funny videos. And recently, I sent her this video of an older woman saying, "Love is like a fart.
Like a fart.
If you force it, it's probably shit."
If you have to force it, it's probably shit.
Das stimmt wirklich.
Love is like a fart.
Ja, genau. When you force it, it's
Probably shit.
Es stimmt, 100 Pro. Mit der Liebe.
We both love that joke.